I wonder, from those poor people that work 14-hour days, 6 days a week, 84-hour work weeks, a fourth of them never lived to the age of 10. 4 out of every 50 made it to the ripe old age of 60. And God, those poor, hard-working farmers and herdsmen, you demanded 10% for worship and 10% for government and another 5% above that for poverty, plus you were supposed to give free will? Unbelievable. Do you think God expects less from us who live in the wealthiest society? Who works 14-hour days, 6 days a week just to exist? Few people in our culture. It's an amazing thought. So, if we think about God's demands upon them, what does grace impel us to do? Well, in history, John Wesley, who wrote many of the hymns that are in your hymn book, said this. He said, I've learned from God that money won't stay with me because it would burn me if it did. I throw it into God's hands as soon as possible, lest my money finds its way into my heart. Remember the Lord said, be careful, because you can love and worship money. Hudson Taylor said, the less I spend on myself, the more I give to others, the fuller of happiness and blessing I have. America is the wealthiest and most unhappy society in the world. Look at the industrialized nations. Japan, a very wealthy, a very unhappy society. Look at Western Europe, a very wealthy, a very unhappy society because they don't give, they take. You know, we all know what the missionary C.T. Studd once said. Most of us don't know he said it. The little poem, Only One Life, 'Twill Soon Be Past, It's Only What's Done for Christ Will Last. That great missionary said that. On his deathbed, his children gathered around him, and he said, I wish I had something to give you. He said, I'm sorry, I gave it all to the Lord long ago. Every one of his children served the Lord to their last days. They saw the example of his great beneficence to God. Well, God has given some timely warnings to us, and let's turn to Ecclesiastes 5. We're going to read verse 10 in just a moment. God says, I want you to know, especially to those of you living in the 21st century, in the most wealthy and consumptive society that's ever existed on planet Earth, I want you to know how I think you should live. And so the book of Ecclesiastes is actually part of a 5-book part of the Bible called the wisdom literature. Job, God's instructions how to suffer. The Psalms, God's instructions how to worship. Proverbs, God's instruction how to live everyday life. Song of Solomon, God's instruction how to love and be loved. But Ecclesiastes, right in the middle of all that, God's instructions on how to have the big picture, the plan of life. In fact, when I come to Ecclesiastes, it's looking on life as a whole. It's kind of like going to a financial planner or one of these new people, you've probably seen ads for them, these life planners. They help you plan your whole life and, know timing and how to really succeed in life. Well, if you look and want to know from God's perspective how to have godly planning and how to think about life, the book of Ecclesiastes is filled with incredible wisdom. And from verse 10 down to 15, we find God giving us a theology of how to look on our possessions. Okay? And I'm going to read these verses and then we'll pray. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity. Verse 11. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? Verse 12. The sleep of the laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much. But the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. Verse 13. There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun, riches kept for their owner to his hurt. Verse 14. But those riches perish through misfortune. When he begets a son, there is nothing in his hand. Verse 15. As he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return, to go as he came, and he shall take nothing from his labor, which he may carry away in his hand. Let's bow before the Lord.